Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the Learning and Skills Scrutiny Committee. The chair, unfortunately, is having IT problems. I believe no one is hoping he resolves them quickly more than what I am. So we'll start in opening the meeting. I'd like to ask whether we have any apologies for this morning.
We've got apologies from Councillor Peter Lewington, from the CEO Caroline Turner, and the Finance Manager Mary Thomas.
Thank you. Anyone else with any?
Chair, could I give apologies for Bryn as well? He's in a governor's meeting. There's been a clash of governors and scrutiny this morning. Apologies.
Thank you, Councillor Aled. Anyone else? As I conclude item 1, I'll take the silence and move to item number 2. Disclosures of interest. Receive any disclosures of interest from members related to items to be considered today at the meeting. No, I'll take the silence. We can move on. Declarations of party weft. Receive disclosures of related party weft from members given in relation to the meeting in accordance with section 78. Again, by silence, we shall move on to the meat of today's meeting, item before draft budget. So, I'd like to welcome Cabinet Member for Education from Learning Powers Qualities, Councillor Roberts, to introduce where we're heading to this morning. Councillor Pete, it's all yours.
Thank you, Chair. Just to introduce this very simply, I have a number of officers with me who will be taking the bulk of the questions today. Director of Education, Annette Lovell, Head of Schools, Georgie Bevan, and in addition, Nancy Owen and Sarah Cabell from the school service. And I also have the 151 officer, Jane, with us to deal with things from the finance side. I'm also joined, if there are specific questions, by the portfolio holder dealing with finance, Councillor David Thomas, and the leader and deputy are here as well. The papers you have before you, I'm just seeing questions on the chat. Can you hear me? Because
I can hear you. I can hear you, Pete. Can everybody else hear?
Sorry, but I had a message come up on my screen that my internet connection's unstable. I was worried that I was breaking up. The papers you have before you to look at today deal with the financial position moving forward for two parts of education: the school service central budget, which also includes the youth parts of the youth service, and the school's delegated budget. I have no further comments to make at this time, but I would invite either Lynette or Georgie, if they want to come in at this point, to set any scene for the works they've undertaken and the reasons behind the savings they're bringing forward to you today. Lynette's going to open up, I think, and draw in other officers as needed.
Thank you, Councillor Pete. Thank you, Councillor Pete. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Can you hear me? Is my volume okay? Yeah.
Thank you,
Councillor Gareth. Yeah, the papers you've got before you today are as a result of much hard work over the past few months, looking not just at the service budget, but also working with all of our schools that are currently going through the recovery from the pandemic, etc. So we've been working very closely with all of our schools, and as a service area as well, looking at the budget. We've been through a rigorous process over the last few months as a service area. Georgie, heading it up as the head of service for education, has been working with the service area and our schools, finance officers as well. So there's much information here in these papers today, and we're happy to to take you through, have any questions that you have as we go through the process today. But really, Georgie and Sarah and Nancy are here today, who have really got the detail behind all of these proposals that are in front of you today. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Pete.
Thank you very much, Lynette. So am I right in thinking that Georgie now is going to take us through some papers and and then we'll be able to open up to some questions from panelists. Great. George, are you with us? Or Sarah? Have we got more gremlins with us this morning?
Can you hear it? Can you hear me now? That's fine.
Yeah, with us now, Georgie. Great.
Okay, lovely. So if I go through just a general picture for us at the moment, what in terms of our school budgets, and then also, sorry, not the school budgets, we'll look at the service area budgets and the savings we put forward there, and then obviously the school budgets as well. So in terms of just a general picture, we worked really closely with our extended leadership team within the service to look at all of our expenditure and identified specific areas that we think we could make savings against. Those areas then enabled us to have dialogue within the service and be challenged externally by the Cabinet. And all of the things that we put forward, we felt were meaningful opportunities to save funding within the service to meet our budget pressures. We then completed the various impact assessments against those, and if Sarah wants to come in at any point here on that one, we're happy to take those questions. So I think from our perspective, that's just a general picture, Councillor Gareth.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Would you like to come in now and add anything to that? There's something wrong with IT this morning.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, got you now.
Did you want me to pick up on the individual lines at this point?
I think it would be beneficial to all of us now to go through us, take it by individual lines, and then pause at any time for any questions arising from what you present.
Okay, no problem at all. So if I just go through the headline lines that are on page 76 of the pack first. So there's a line around the use of grant funding to offset base funded staff within the Curriculum for Wales team. There is the removal of a vacant school improvement advisor post that's been vacant for quite some time. There's looking at income generation across the service, and that's continuing some work that we commenced in the current financial year. There's a look at a reduction in external secondary strategy support while internal support has been increased. There's a line around how the post-16 transition will be managed within service. Then there's two further lines again around vacant posts or hours that have been removed that have been vacant for quite some time. So one is from the HIVI team and one is from the autism teacher. There is a line around the transformation of specialist centres, but that is not for this current financial year, well, this coming financial year.
I see Councillor Lucy's hand up, and I'm guessing a question relevant to the line you just highlighted. Councillor Lucy, please.
Yes, certainly.
My question relates to a couple of the lines about vacant posts. And can you just explain, I might be being very foolish here, but if a post's been vacant for some time, how are we actually saving money by taking that post away? Because presumably we're not paying somebody for a vacant post now. So how does that make a difference?
The hours would have been budgeted within the structure, so the funding would have sat there.
Okay. But yeah, I guess my point still holds that we're not actually saving any money. It's just coming out of the budget.
It would mean that it wouldn't be accessible for us to use. So essentially, even though the post has been vacant, the funding has been accessible. So we're saying by removing the post, that funding will no longer be available to the service. Okay,
thank you. And another question about the lines where money is it's being taken from the schools, there's a central budget, but the individual schools are having to pick it up then as part of their delegated budget, and how that makes a difference to the council's overall expenditure.
I think there is a correct alignment of spend. making sure that the correct expenditure is coming out of the correct budgets, and those discussions have been had with Schools Forum as well.
But again, there's not a reduction to the overall schools budget, the overall council's budget. It's just moving the funds around. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify those.
No problem.
I think that's a very valid point. Very valid when we're looking at moving forward. I've got two other hands up. I do believe Councillor Winver managed to join us. Is that right, Gwynfor? Are you there? He's for once he's quiet. No. In that case, we'll carry on waiting for Gwynfor to Councillor Allardyce, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, sorry, Chair, I couldn't hear what you were saying. Were you asking me to speak?
Sorry, Councillor Allen first, and then we'll come to you after. So that's okay.
It's fine, it's all echoing, so I yeah, carry on, sorry.
Sorry, thank you. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on Lucy's comments, really. I'm not sure, was there a big surplus left over from the education at the end of, well, do you expect a surplus? Because if the funding from that vacant post, it clearly probably has been spent on some other area of the service. So which other area of the service will be impacted since its possible overspend has been mitigated by that vacant post?
Who wishes to respond to that? Yeah.
Georgie, did you want me to respond, or did you want to come in there?
Do you want to come in first, Sarah, and then if there's anything additional, I'll add it in terms of the thought process we had.
I think there were two questions there, Councillor Alid. One was, are we expecting a big surplus? And no, we're budgeting to, well, within budget, so we're not expecting a surplus.
Oh yeah, surplus within this financial year, sorry.
No.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
And the elements around the removal of vacant posts recognise the changing nature of the team over the last few years. So that's mitigated and covers, you know, additional teams, additional posts, and just really reflects that the team that we have now is the structure that it needs to be.
Yeah, yes, no, my point was that that funding that wasn't used for that vacant post has been used for something else.
No,
so you don't think the service will be impacted at all?
No, we've. Oh, I was going to say, Nancy, would you like to come in from the finance perspective, and then I'll come back.
Yeah, so, sorry, it was quite echoey this side. So yeah, just to clarify, in relation to the outturn for school service, we've obviously been working hard over the last couple of months reviewing the outturn position. There is an overall projected surplus for the school service central overall. However, picking up on Councillor Alid's point, we will, in relation to those vacant hours that are in these budget proposals, we will have included those as slippage as part of our overall underspend, unless there's been any environments required, which to my knowledge there hasn't been, to move that budget on a temporary basis. That hasn't been done, so therefore it will be projected in our outturn position, which is an overall surplus, and then part of the review then as working with the service was to look at, well, what is the overall structure Georgie requires for her service, and then removing those vacant hours and the permanent budget. So there is nothing else that can be used against those budgets going forward once they've been offered up now in the financial planning.
Okay, thanks, Nancy. Yeah, so the first response was it sounded as though the whole budget had been used up and there wouldn't be a surplus in this financial year. But thanks for that. The grant funding element you talked about, replacing the revenue. How long is that grant funding in place for?
So if it's okay to come back in there, the grant funding we've been looking at is for our ongoing regular main grants. It's not looking at additional grants that have not been in place for a long time. These are grants that we receive year on year, and they're the type of grants that if there was going to be any change, the Welsh Government would have to undertake significant consultation and provide significant notice around the changing them.
Okay, so what was that grant currently being spent on?
The grants are currently spent on, often they have slightly changing terms and conditions, and are spent on the need within the service and schools in that particular year. And in terms of the staff that will be funded by those grants, that's seen as the need going forward.
Okay, diolch yn fawr, Sarah.
Lynette's got her hand
As
up.
Lynette's got her hand up, yeah.
Chair, is it all right if I come in?
I think I'm back in the room now. Can we just confirm that I'm with you now?
Yep.
We could hear your answer, you Gwenfire.
Yeah.
I think I give Councillor Gareth a heart attack then, to be honest with you. But, apologies. I think I picked up where you are anyway. So Sarah's been presenting, and Lynette, you're coming in to answer Alad's query, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, you'll be aware that for us in the school service, since last September, we're no longer in Eru, and Eru that is finished, and we're now part of a Mid Wales education partnership with Ceredigion, and we're under a memorandum of understanding. As part of the Mid Wales education partnership, the funding for school improvement now comes directly to us at Powys County Council, rather than going into Eru. The grants, the EIG, the PD, everything like that is now coming direct to us at Powys. So what we've been able to do really is look effectively at how we can use those grants as part of the Mid Wales Education Partnership. We have very little funded posts between Ceredigion and Powys. You know, we've got our own staff. In fact, the secondary school improvement team, much of their work, the professional learning team, a lot of their work is, they're in posts. It's grant funded, but the grant funding now from Welsh Government is coming direct to us as a service. So we're benefiting from having those grants directly, and they are as permanent as they possibly can be, because of the nature of the fact that they are there for school improvement, and they do go to the other regions. But for Powys and Ceredigion, that money is coming directly to us, Councillor Aled. So that grant funding is as sure as it can be, and that's why we've been able to offset some of the posts from base now into and some of the work from our base budget into grant funding, due to the fact that we have the money coming directly to us for the Mid Wales Education Partnership.
Okay, Chair, can I just come back in just very quickly on that? And that's good news. The money is coming directly to Powys, but I got the impression in the past that the money we were notionally sort of putting into Eru through, well, from Welsh Government, we were getting far more out of it, really good value for money out of Eru compared to other local authorities. So are we going to get the same value of grant to support the same level of work in supporting our schools going forward?
Yes, we are. That's a really good point, actually, because, you know, we were part of a larger region and there were economies of scale. We had, you know, in particular, you know, at the time as well, looking at secondary school improvement, it was the secondary treatment Eru that, you know, we were able to access, and the expertise. What we have been able to do is appoint our own staff, and of course, across with Ceredigion, we're able to cover all of those aspects of work with the grant funding that comes to us. We've got a good professional learning team who really have taken that forward well. And also, as I say, a secondary school improvement team now as well, that we've got Powys based. So they really are able to focus on the Powys schools as we move forward. So I'm confident and can give assurance to you, Councillor Aled, today that the Mid Wales Education Partnership is, and we have been under scrutiny with Welsh Government. We've been for the challenge and meetings with them, and also we've had our own you know, internal ESTIN. They were in a week ago, 2 weeks ago actually, to look at specifically at the Mid Wales Education Partnership and how it's going forward. And I can give you Scrutiny assurances today that that funding that's coming directly to us is being utilised effectively, and we hope to see a significant impact, particularly around our secondary schools as we move forward.
Brilliant. Diolch yn fawr, Lynette.
Diolch.
Thank you. Councillor Liz, so you're waiting patiently.
Thank you, Chair. I can hear you now. Well, I think it was Gareth before where there was a lot of echo. The questions I wanted on grants and secondary improvement strategy have been covered. I wanted to ask about the domestic abuse and sexual violence, because I picked up that that's going to be brought internally, and there's going to be a train the trainer scheme. I just wanted to, you know, get some assurance about capacity to do that, because I know that, you know, people are very stretched and it's a really critical part of training that needs to be done. So, you know, what's your level of confidence on that one, please?
You happy for me to respond, or did you want to come in, Georgie?
Georgie's got her hand up, so should we take Georgie first and then come
Yeah.
to you, Sarah, to give some addition to it, perhaps?
Diolch yn fawr, Chair. Thank you very much. Yeah, Liz, Councillor Liz, in terms of, we are really confident in the model. It's a train the trainer model, which is used a lot in education, but also it enables us to access our connections with our schools through our SIAs and our school improvement advisors and the PL team. So part of the model is to work with our service area to enable that element of coinciding with teaching resources as well as delivery and training to staff. So yeah, we are really confident that this model is the right fit for school staff, but at all levels, and we have the capacity within the service to provide this training, because we do provide similar training in different ways through Sway and on demand, etc. And Sarah might come in there as around the other elements of training we successfully deliver in the model we're proposing.
And so is there a plan in place sort of set out now for those train the trainer events to begin?
Yeah, Sarah, do you want to come in there, Sarah? Yes, we have begun those discussions internally, but I'll hand to Sarah.
They are discussions that we've begun to have, and our plan is being developed, currently ready to be in place for the beginning of the next financial year. As Georgie says, we have full confidence to be able to deliver against that, and also deliver an agile training service that will enable our schools to take part in it and increase our compliance in that area.
Thank you. So you know, there's definitely assurance there that there'll be no gaps. So thank you for that information.
Lynette's looking to come in as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we can give that assurance today. It's a vital piece of work, and it's really essential that our school staff are trained. They're at the front line of, you know, of this work really, and seeing the effects that some of this can have on children in particular is vital that they have that training. At the moment, our numbers are not where they should be or need to be, and we need to improve compliance. What we have seen over the pandemic in particular is different ways of working, different ways of training. And so, as Georgie and Sarah have already said, what we found, even with governor training now going forward, it's online, different versions. People, school-based staff can access the training when they want to. Sometimes they end up doing more hours than they should, that's for sure, but they do need this training. We need to find alternative ways to, and we've already got a track record during the pandemic of how training has been enabled to be given to schools more effectively, online, blended approach to ensure that they have that essential training. Our numbers at the moment are not where they need to be or should be, and we need to ensure going forward, and we have a plan. We've already done it with GDPR training, for example, at schools, where that's rolled out to schools online. So that's the kind of model we're looking for as we go forward, and cluster-based approaches. So Councillor Liz, can assure you that this work will not be, we want to improve the performance of training in schools and see it, you know, ensuring our staff are fully equipped to be dealing with this on the front line. So you can give that assurance to Scrutiny today.
Thank you, Lynette.
Thank you, Councillor Liz. Margaret.
Sorry, I was someone knocked the door. Yeah, the Mid Wales Educational Partnership is a new development for us, or for Scrutiny. I knew how we had meetings with ERU from a Scrutiny perspective and monitored that. I'm not clear yet how Scrutiny are going to be involved with sort of monitoring, to some extent, Mid Wales Educational Partnership. And I don't know enough about it, I don't think.
Georgie.
Councillor Margaret. Yes, we talked about this at last Scrutiny. It's on our agenda for upcoming one of the Scrutiny meetings that we've got to talk through the Mid Wales Education Partnership, how it works, what it does, what it entails, and what responsibilities sits with LAs and which sits with the Mid Wales Education Partnership. So we have got that scheduled as one of our agenda items moving forward, so that Scrutiny panel can be brought up to speed around the structure of the Mid Wales Education Partnership. Lynette?
Yeah, Scrutiny's got a vital part to play in all of this as we move forward. So the Mid Wales Education Partnership has been in being for a year. We started working on it last year, and really we're coming up to the end of the financial year now. We will have to evaluate and bring that to Scrutiny and evaluate how effective it's been, and we will also need to bring to Scrutiny the business plan for the Mid Wales Education Partnership for next financial year as well. So it is on the agenda, and Scrutiny have got a vital part to make sure that our business plan and our evaluation of performance is scrutinised effectively. So it is on the agenda.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Good. Is that the questions at this point? Okay, Sarah, I believe we were with you, so if you're happy to continue.
Yes, certainly, Chair. I was just going through the lines of the savings, and I think I'd got as far as so transformation stage 1 for the pupil referral units, and then there's been a review of third sector spend around the Action for Children contract, looking then at grant funded staff to manage pay inflation, a realignment of union costs to be funded by the delegated contingency. Then there's a line which looks at very specific restructure in areas of the service. That's not across the board, that's just very particular areas. Looking at the EIG to retained to offset foundation learning based funded staff, so very similar to the previous item that we were discussing. The consultancy budget to be removed and therefore replaced by the work of the school improvement advisors. The violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence contribution that we were just discussing, and that's the bottom of the list. So that's the headlines of the savings. I can see Councillor Lucy has her hand up.
Come on in, Councillor Lucy.
Morning, Chair. Thank you. Yeah, it's just a question, a general question actually, or a point of information about the impact assessments that go with each of these lines. I found reading the impact assessments really disappointing, because I didn't feel I was able to get anything like enough information from the impact assessments to come to any form of conclusion as to whether the savings were realistic or not. And I would really strongly ask that in future there's a lot more detail provided in the impact assessment, so that we can see clearly where the cost savings or the additional costs are, and can really be clear in our own minds that they aren't making an impact. Because reading through these impact assessments, one after another, they seem to say there's not going to be any impact on the service, but actually there's nothing there that gives us that strength that is the case. So that was just my comment really on those, please.
Yeah, no, Councillor Lucy, I think I can add to that, and you very carefully worded it in the future. I would go back and say, to be stronger, that they needed to be done. They need to be done now before these savings are agreed by Cabinet, because there isn't detail there. And in my opinion, I agree with Lucy that we can't mitigate that all these savings, what that impact will be on the school service. So Georgie, if you'd like to come in on that.
Welcome, Ralph, and thank you everybody. Really appreciate the feedback on the impact assessments. In terms of the savings and the assurance there, I think if it's not felt is captured in the documentation, I just want to reassure Scrutiny that we looked at everything in detail. It enabled us to look line by line across our budget and identify areas that we do need to review and ensure we are moving in the right direction. For example, the removal of posts. We know right now that provision is now provided across a breadth of officers, which falls in line with our ALN strategy. So that's a better model than the model that was existing previously. So in line with those elements there, we certainly have made sure that those potential savings that have been identified do fit with the need of the service and the future of the service. What I would say is Councillor Peake, Sarah and I have been put forward to work on generally looking at the impact assessment. So any feedback is really valid there, because for us, well, for myself particularly, it was my first time at doing it, but Sarah's more experienced than me. But we did spend a significant amount of time on them and making sure that they contain the detail that we thought was relevant and needed, but any feedback is really appreciated. So diolch yn fawr, thank you very much.
Councillor Aled.
Just a quick comment on the impact assessment. Tend to agree with Lucy and yourself, Chair, but it would be useful if they could have been stripped out for this meeting. I'm always scared of, there's so much documentation here. I'm always scared of missing something. But just a couple of queries really. The pupil referral units, couldn't really undertake and understand exactly what the impact of that was. And I know the transformation specialist centres is for subsequent years another over £500,000 coming out of that. I don't know how much is tied up with the rebuild of Cadwyn as well. Also the Wowsers contribution, is that impacting on there's a post that's disappearing. The white ribbon post is disappearing. It sounds as, is that impacting on that at all? Or does the white ribbon funding come from another area of the council? Because there's quite a bit of unhappiness about that as well. There was another one. Oh, I'll leave it at that for now. There was another line somewhere. I'll come back to you when I find it. Sorry. Thank you.
Any comments on the white ribbon officer?
Yeah, happy to come in.
Anybody jumping in there, Lynette or anybody?
Yeah, do you want me just to come in? As such for the white ribbon, etc. I'm not commenting as such, but I just wanted to make the point that for this part of the budget for school service, it is about looking at different ways of delivering the training, and the impact corporately will be looked at separately, I think. But for us in the school service, this is about the delivery of training to our frontline workers.
Okay.
Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Gareth.
No, sorry, I was just wondering if you a little bit more on the
yeah, no, so apologies
on the other two lines, the people referral units, and does that impact one of them, or is that across the board? And I don't know whether you just a headline, a couple of sentences on the specialist centres going forward.
I'm happy to come in there, Chair, if that's okay. Yep, just again coming back to the Powers ALN strategy and the rollout of that, I think it's worth reiterating again that we've been identified in the Aston annual report as a county that's moving in the right direction with our ALN strategy and our approaches. So we'd looked at the ALN elements. The next bit then is looking at our pupil referral units. The model has been in place a significant amount of time. So we want to look at that and see if it's the right model, but we have already identified potential savings from looking at spend patterns, etc. as well. So we know that that saving we proposed is achievable. But in the longer game, we want to look at the structure of the PRUs and make sure that they are fit for the needs of the young people across Paris. I visited one 2 weeks ago and saw the provision and service that we offer there. So this is part of a bigger picture, Councillor Allard, just ensuring that all of our sort of provision is in line with an emerging and changing landscape, particularly off the back of COVID and what we've seen around elements of mental health, ALN diagnosis, etc. In terms of the latter decisions around specialist centres, etc., again, that we need to look at that across Paris, ensure that fits with our ALN strategy and vision. And the new ALN Act is regarding incorporating more children of ALN learners in mainstream education and making sure that they're having access to all learning opportunities, and all the research says that is the better process and method for those young people. So again, that's part of this. The bigger picture in the long game is looking at that as part of our ALN strategy.
Thank you. And that's just a one-off saving. You don't have anything in subsequent years, or perhaps that's under review, is it? Or...
That's under review. And again, we need to look at the needs of the county, because you have pockets in line with what, we see emerging for groups of young people, etc. So that's a later down the stage sort of discussion and review.
Okay, thank you. I was looking at the pressures. The other one I was going to ask a question about was under the pressures. There's clearly a pressure and leisure centres, and there's more, increased funding to Freedom Leisure to look after the service it provides to schools. Can you assure us that all the swimming pools will remain open for the next 12 months?
I can't assure you anything regarding leisure centres. I don't, I'm not the head of service for leisure, but I can assure you that as a service, as the sort of the voice of schools, we work very closely with that area of the council to make sure that any decisions aren't impacting on curriculum provision and delivery. And we have a member of my own secondary team who's working very closely with the leisure centres and schools to make sure that we're using them to the best of their ability as well, to enhance as an effective curriculum as possible for the young people of Paris.
Thank you. That's good news that the leisure services provided to the schools will not be impacted in the next 12 months. Thank you, Georgie.
Yeah, I think there's an important point to be made there, because this budget doesn't identify the urgency that was expressed in December when there was a temporary closure of leisure centres and the impact that had on schools. There was comment by the portfolio holder then that there was urgent action required. And the comments that have been made this morning aren't in relation to that, because we took an undertaking as Scrutiny right across the board that we would assist in this, and yet we're coming to the end of January, and despite requests from myself and the Chair of Health and I'm not sure what Councillor Amanda, that we wanted to know how we could assist in this, and now we're coming to the end of January, and certainly no comment in the budget papers either. So I think Ali's point is very relevant there. Lynette.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to come in on that as well, just to say that obviously from the school service, as Georgie has said, we do work very closely with leisure, and whilst we can't give assurances that things won't change, what we do give assurance to this committee today is that the curriculum offer will be assured in whatever capacity that is, even if it's working differently, etc., and just to ensure that the curriculum offer with regards to anything that is involving leisure centres, it could be that things are done differently. So we're working very closely with leisure services to see how we can work effectively going forward and ensuring that the curriculum offer is not in any way affected, and perhaps it's doing things differently. So just to say, that's the assurance we can give today, is that we are working closely with the head of service for leisure to look at the curriculum offer as we move forward.
Okay, thank you, Lynette. Councillor Gareth.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me now? Am I echoing?
Yeah,
or am I
yeah. No, you're absolutely fine.
Good. Can I refer to the impact assessment on page 2 and about all the savings that have been identified? I think some of these are quite ambitious and question is, do we realistically think they're achievable? It's number one, is turn off lighting when it's not being used, a saving of 194,000. Is that calculated on the current electric prices or the upcoming electric prices? And the cessation of photocopying activity, of saving of 243,000 bar a few pounds. Can I have clarification of what this exactly means? Does that say we're having no more photocopying within our schools? If we could answer that, and if I can come back in, thank you.
Jochen Val, Councillor Gareth. Chair, am I happy for me to answer?
Yeah, please, please do.
Okay. As we know from various discussions we've had with chairs of governors across this year, every chair of governor and head teacher is responsible for their budget. What we have done is tried to provide opportunities and examples of what savings that have been made in other areas. Now, those figures regarding lighting, etc., and best practice, that is common across other schools and other sectors. So again, it's something that's not only energy efficient, but it is a potential saving for schools, and we have modelled that saving generally across the budget. There are obviously schools that are already doing that. So it's again a school by school decision, and one of the reasons why we've supported every finance surgery with looking at the various different elements of that. In terms of the photocopying budget, again, that's a school's choice as to how much budget they allocate to the photocopying, but we are in the digital world, and there are schools both within Powys and out of Powys that have gone to a more digital approach in their learning and the way they capture learner work and evidence, and that's a cost saving, but also really important for the development of young people's digital skills to be able to go into the workforce. So from our perspective, they are just savings that we have identified as part of our financial toolkit that schools can consider. And I also think it's really worth saying here that the finance officers meet with ADU and other counties regularly to discuss this, and our toolkit has been requested to be shared further afield with other LAs because they felt it was a good resource to use for discussion, not to say this is how you do it, but to have those discussions when you're reviewing your individual school budgets. And we've also brought in the benchmarking tool as well that enables a school to see what they're spending against different elements as a general picture in Powys. So all of it is a collective piece of information that can be used to determine the right savings for individual schools as part of this budget saving procedure. So that's the main focus of it, and the figures we've got have been modelled by the finance team on the most relevant information we have regarding energy, etc.
Okay, just before Gareth comes back in, but in view of those comments, so those schools have got to put that in practice so the budget doesn't stack up.
Yeah, the schools will have to make the decision as to what they will do for their budgets to make sure that they can make those savings. And we're in that process of looking at those budgets with the schools at this moment in time.
Gareth, I know you want to come back in.
No, I'm fine with that, Chair. Georgie answered that. Thank you.
Okay, just on that, and I haven't got that page in front of me. If I could just develop Gareth's point there, it says that the gas increase of 283%. Okay, gas has fallen, and the predictions are that gas will continue to fall in the short term. So I'm just saying, well, what's the relevance of that information if it's not correct?
What I would say is we are constantly remodeling and changing it. So when that information was got together, it was at that point. We know the figure's lower now, and that's why it's so volatile, because for us it's changing regularly, so we're having to remodel it regularly. And we also know that some schools have different heating systems, so it's not relevant to every school. That's why it's a real bespoke element of potential savings school by school.
Okay, Councillor Lucy.
Yeah, so I just wanted to come back on Gareth's point because it was something that had bothered me too. I mean, in terms of things like the temperature change, Georgie said some schools will already be doing that. So if some schools have already introduced that saving, that means that somebody else is going to have to find extra, that money's, if we're saying that money is going to be saved across the board, whether it's from, say, reducing temperature or not, if some schools have already done it, then the money's got to be found elsewhere, and it's the same with the photocopying. And from the impact assessment, I would have expected to see something that said, right, schools are currently operating at this temperature and they're likely to have to go down to that temperature, and this means that the kids will have to wear their coats to school, or whatever the impact of that reduction would be. So yeah, it just really bothers me that we're saying that across the board those changes are going to save this amount of money, when the reality is that it won't be possible in all schools. Some schools have already done it, some schools won't be able to do it, and so the savings are going to have to, in reality, be made elsewhere.
Councillor Lucy, I will bring Mari in because Mari's popped her hand up, but what I would say is that figure is not as high as it could be because we factored in schools that we know are already doing certain procedures to save that. So that's a collective saving, and we have factored into account the schools that we already know that have done specific things in line with the recommendations we're doing. But I'll bring Mari in if that's okay.
Oh yeah, Mari. I was told that you were on annual leave today, so I'm quite shocked to see you.
Yes, sorry. I thought this was too important a meeting to miss, to be fair.
Thank you very much.
So George is absolutely right. Well, we estimated a global figure and then we factored it down because we knew that some schools would have already, we had feedback from finance surgeries that they were already doing some of these things. And then we also know that there are other schools that could do more as well. So we did allow for that in these estimates when we calculated them.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but again, I do agree with Lucy that if that detail was in the impact assessments, we'd have that greater assurance. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, just to follow on that, have those sums of money been allocated school by school? Because clearly there'll be different energy requirement from a new build like Brecon High compared to Bro Hathgain, which is coming to the end of life, and rebuild is in the next few years. So there would be a huge energy efficiency difference between the various schools. So has that some been allocated on the school by school basis?
We're already working with individual schools. I was in one last week and they were saying, well, we're oil powered, so we have a different, so we are, as part of those finance surgeries, looking at that kind of detail. We've also looking at spend patterns within individual budgets, for example, as well, and proposing solutions there. So for the 93 schools, we are looking at each budget in that kind of sort of intrinsic detail so we can identify potential savings. We've also gone into a couple of schools at their request with the financials team to look at potential savings across the board as well. So from our perspective, we are nuancing it school by school, if you like. Right, it's not, we have it as an overall saving in the impact assessment, but we're working really closely with individual schools around their setting and their individual pressures.
Lynette.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is where the benchmarking tool that we've devised is key here, and Nancy's done an excellent job developing this benchmarking tool that is now available to all schools. So you can clearly see schools of similar size, etc., how much more perhaps one school is spending on photocopying, for example, than another. It's all in there in the benchmarking tool so that at an individual level, we can see the spending patterns and not just us anymore. Schools can compare their spending patterns with other schools, and that tool really is effective, particularly now when we're working through all of these pressures with schools to look to find where they can make it. May not be massive amounts of money, but we're looking, that's where we're at the moment. We've got to look for everything. So I think the benchmarking tool here, which has been seen by Estin and commented upon and has been shared to other local authorities, something we've devised here in Powys, and thanks to, as I say, Nancy and our finance colleagues for doing this work. It is a really effective tool, I believe, going forward for schools to compare themselves against other similar schools to see where some of these costs that we've outlined here, the heating, for example, knowing that there's different buildings and different heating systems, yes, but some of the areas like photocopying, for example, it can become really apparent which schools are using more and why, and that's an issue as well. So I think that's going to be really helpful for us to really bring it down to the detail that we want for each school as we move forward, and that give you some assurance that we have that tool to work with across all our sector now.
Aled, looking to come back in?
No, that's fine. That's great.
Yeah, that's fine. And if I make some comment from the chair, I think there's a feeling that these savings are not. We're not sure if they can be made in this area, and I worry in the secondary sector, sector, because that will mean that they will have to go to reserves, and many high schools are showing, secondary schools are showing deficits, so there's nowhere for them to go. There's going to be an awful lot of pain. We pick up stories coming out of schools now where they've reduced their heating. I was told the other day the headmaster had told its staff that if they were called to bring in their own heating. I'm not sure, again, when we're told this, I'm never sure what they're true, but the only escape which they will have is to draw down from reserves. So I think we're on very, very dangerous ground here, and I really do worry about it. So if they can't be made, the next option is to go to reserves, and in the secondary sector, those reserves aren't there. So I'm not sure where we go from there. Councillor Aled.
Thanks, Gwynfor. Are we discussing the delegated budget now? Or
well, we're just looking at those headlines now. I'm not really sure how's the best way to headline it. Yes, I've developed something else there, haven't I? But it is in response to those savings, which I think we're unsure on, is what happens next. I'm going to bring Emma in here now.
I was just wondering if we are still on the education service. I just had one final question on that before moving on to delegated. And
yes, please, let's get that out of the way. I'll just bring Emma in there now.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what the current year's budget for the education services and what is the draft proposal for next year's education service. What is the total figure?
Anybody able to answer that one?
I assume Councillor Peter would have that at his fingertips.
It's in the MTFS, Aled. I'm just pulling up the table so I get the figures right.
Pete, while you're searching for that, I'm going to bring Emma in. Yeah, if you can.
Councillor David might have them to hand as well.
Yeah, you have a search. We'll bring Emma in.
Thank you, Chair. It's in relation to the last point around energy. So there's a couple of things, and the conversation did touch upon surplus and also the use of reserves. Of course, even if we park the energy element at the moment, there is change for some schools that will need to be undertaken, because even if you look at their finances, their challenges that stand, so it would suggest that there are some changes within schools that are needed, but I'm sure we'll come into that on the delegated. But the positive on the energy side of things, whilst the team continue to watch the schemes that are available, what's happening with the energy prices. If Nigel Bryn was with us today, he'd be able to refer to some work that he's also doing, drawing down grant funding for green energy, and that green energy then will be able to work with the school's infrastructure to look how we develop that further. So some of that is happening now. I appreciate it's not a silver bullet in terms of answers ready for the 1st of April, but it's not all negative. There will be schemes available to develop that further that will hopefully help us then with moving to the net zero and also reduce the cost to the schools themselves. I just thought it might be helpful to add that in. Sorry, I don't have the detail, but just to say that the work is happening.
That's great to hear, Emma, but obviously that will impact on a capital spend then, and which will impact on the revenue as we go forward.
I think it's the grant fundings that come in, so then it wouldn't affect our own capital, so we'd be able to benefit from those wider schemes. But that might be something for the future to consider for scrutiny to get into the detail.
Okay, I'm assuming, Jane, you're coming in on Aled's question there, so I'm coming to you there, Jane.
Yes, Chair, that's correct. If everybody looks at the table 5 in the budget report, that does show the budget allocated in the current year for both the education service and the delegated budget, and then shows the increase across both those budgets then in terms of next year's budget as well. So I can read out the figures. Otherwise, if everybody wants to look at that table, it does give you the full information.
Just read out the figures for us, Jane.
Okay, so for the education central budget, last year's budget, or the current year's base budget, I should say, is 17.3 million, and that rises to 18.4 for for 23-24. And for the delegated budget, the current year's budget is 79.5 million, and that rises to 83.8 million for 23-24. So both will see an uplift. The central education budget gets an additional 6.5%, and the school's delegated budget gets an additional 5.5%.
Thank you, Jane. Councillor Pete, have you got any further comment on that before I go back to Aled?
No, that was just about what I'd got to actually say. But Jane, you invited Jane in first.
Okay, Councillor Aled.
Yeah, no further comment really, except that they're considerably below the rate of inflation at the moment, especially the delegated schools budget, being a big energy consumer. And but we'll get onto the delegated school budget now, won't we? So, thank you,
Councillor Lucy.
Yeah, my point was just going back to the use of reserves. And again, I think it's not just secondary schools, but there are some primary schools who don't have any reserves they're able to draw on. But also the point on that within the budget report for Cabinet, it says under MTFS principles that reserves will not be used to finance recurrent budget pressures or keep down council tax rises. And while I appreciate that's relating to the council budget overall, surely the same should apply to schools. We shouldn't be expecting them to use their reserves for ongoing costs. Thank you.
Jane, once again.
Yeah, I think the principle is there, as you rightly point out. I think in terms of the use of specific reserves, particularly when we increased reserves at the end of last year, we are drawing on some of those reserves as a one-off to meet these additional costs. And the expectation at the moment is that schools would look to manage these costs for 1 year. We do have, if the situation continues and energy costs are still as high as they are now by 24-25, then we will have to look at that budget and our future years budgets as to whether that pressure needs to be accommodated differently. So it is only an expectation that this is a one-off use of reserves to manage those costs for 1 year.
Okay, okay.
Okay. Any more questions? Good. Go on, Aled.
Yeah, no, I was looking at the delegated budget really, and the use of reserves. I was wondering if the portfolio holder could tell me what the overall level of the school reserves 31st of, or the beginning of this financial year, and what the overall level of reserves will be. Councillor David even. The overall level of reserves will be at the end of the 23-24 financial year. In other words, from April 22 to March 24. What are those two figures, and what is the overall change in the level of reserves?
All those figures are included in the confidential paper that you were sent, so I don't want to actually go into the detail on that, because by its very nature it is confidential.
Well, I don't think that is confidential.
Well, that's not for me to decide. That's what I've been told and what the discussion was about at the start of this meeting. So I'll leave it at that for the time being. But I will answer your question. I think if I first go back to the point you made earlier about the increases in the education, the delegated budget being below the rate of inflation, I think it's worth remembering that the actual settlement percentage increase was well below the rate of inflation as well. So unfortunately, it's an absolute financial impossibility to match any increase in service areas above the rate of inflation, unfortunately, because the settlement simply wouldn't allow that. But what I will say is that if you look at the pay inflation and the cost non-pay inflation that are going to impact the education budget this year, I think it totals, if you take in last year's, the current year's pay award as well, it's about £7.6 million. Now you're asking what the situation would be at the end of March 24. Every category of school, apart from secondary schools, is still going to have a surplus balance. Now, I do accept that it is concerning that the balance within the secondary sector is going to be significant. But when you consider that we've had to absorb £7.6 million of pay award pressure and inflationary pressures within non-pay areas, I think that's quite an achievement. It goes without saying. In actual fact, if you look at the £7.6 million, I think some of the budgets that were set in previous years, that's not far off with the total efficiencies within the whole council added up to. So let's not underestimate that achievement within this budget, because to be quite frank, I think somebody ought to be congratulating some of the officers who've been involved in this. That at the end of the day, you know, the overall position with school reserves is only a deficit of 1.5 million. And there's a lot more work got to be done on that through financial surgeries, etc. So it's totally unfair, you know, when you, first of all, when you consider that the overall settlement percentage was well below the rate of inflation, almost 3% below the rate of inflation, to criticize, you know, the fact that by the end of March 24, that all schools are in a surplus position as far as their reserves are concerned, other than the secondary sector. I hope that helps answer, but I don't want to actually go into individual figures, because my understanding is that that's confidential. And until I'm told differently, well.
No, it's when you're discussing individual schools, it may be confidential, but when you're talking about the global figures, I don't think it is confidential. The budget settlement was 8.7%, which is fairly close to the rate of inflation, unlike the 3.8% that you decided to increase council tax, and that is what you've got control of. So you shouldn't be really criticizing the level of the budget settlement when you are significantly below that in areas that you can control. The overall budget surplus at the start of the 2022 calendar was more or less £11.7 million.
No, that's not the figure I've got here.
And I understand.
Wait a minute.
And I understand that that is going to go into an overall deficit position. I'm not 100% sure of the figure, whether it's £4.4 million deficit or £1.5 million deficit. That's a huge swing in the level of reserves. You're going from a positive, really positive.
No, if we're going into these figures, Aled, you need to get them correct, because March 22, the overall figure is 8.9 million, and that included 5.9 million that was awarded to schools at the end of the 21-22 year. Without that 5.9 million, it would have been a £3 million reserve. Now that money was used up by schools within that year. So whereas at the end of March 23, where you've got a £3.7 million surplus, that could have been significantly less. And as I said, at the end of March 24, you're looking at, after the savings that are proposed, you're looking at a £1.5 million deficit. That's after accounting for £7.6 million worth of inflationary pressures. And, you know, you're saying that the overall budget was almost at the rate of inflation. At the time this was set, it was 11.2, and the overall budget is 8.2. That's the figure I've got in front of me, the increase in the overall settlement. And bear in mind as well that all the money within that settlement, every single penny, was passported over to the education budget. Now, if you're saying that we've got to put more into it, well, it's got to come from somewhere else, isn't it? So if you want to tell me where else it can come from, fine. Or would you like us to increase council tax? You know, it's fine to criticize things, but at the same time, it's helpful. I know that this isn't what we're here for, but it's helpful if you can put some suggestions forward as to the way forward you'd like to see us go. Because I'm particularly proud of this budget under the circumstances, because the pressures we've had to absorb and the challenges we've faced are just unprecedented. I've never seen anything like it. Now, if you have, please tell me, because I'd like to know.
Yeah, the rate of inflation next year will be significantly lower. And what is the pressures on the schools at the beginning of the following financial year? There will be a huge deficit. There'll be a £4 million deficit within the high schools. Can we agree on that?
If the inflationary pressures that actually develop in the next financial year are less, and all the indications are that they will be, you know, as long as the economic indication that are currently being focused are correct, then that's going to actually ease the pressure on the schools' budgets, and that's going to reduce the deficit in secondary schools, not increase it.
Yes. So why? are you allowing the schools to go into such a big deficit? Secondary schools, about £3.9 million. The previous council
no.
really put the schools on a really sound financial footing, and this cabinet has just ripped that away.
Well, you know, the reality of the situation, Aled, is, and you know this as well as I do, that first of all, the previous council benefited from a £5.9 million injection into school funds at the end of 21-22. And you didn't know, I certainly didn't know, that the economy was going to be impacted with an inflation rate of over 11%. Now, you just don't seem to be able to accept the fact that we've had to manage that impact and that challenge. And I say it again, we've done it. And the outcome in March 24 for schools, as far as the school's delegated budget is concerned, is manageable and it will recover. Particularly when we look forward at projected forecasts with regard to inflation, etc. Obviously, there are still some concerns about any further increase in interest rates, but no, there's all positive news around the inflation rate, and let's hope that that's what materializes.
The budgets you have set schools will force them to go into a deficit position. There's absolutely no doubt about that. You were fortunate to inherit a school schools with budgets with significant reserves that really did put the schools on a sound financial position. And if we remember this time last year, I made it very clear about the impact of inflation, and that I didn't think that possibly enough was put in to cover inflation. But at the same time, you wanted to reduce the council's overall budget for this council of £15 million. That was your proposal, David. And
we didn't know, and you didn't know, that the UK economy was going to be impacted at that time by an inflation rate in October. An inflation rate in October, 11.3%, and that's the issue, that we have had to manage this impact. You didn't know that. I didn't know that. If you did know it, then arguably you should have put more protection into the budget for the inflation that we were going to face last October, which you didn't do. So I don't understand that. And let's go back to this again. You know,
I think
into significant risk here.
Aled,
huge risk.
Aled, I think there's been some interesting information which has been developed here, and there's some interesting figures. I'm going to let it continue, but can we not make it the David Aled show and stick to the figures in front of us? Okay, I'm going to let it go. David, you were speaking. I'm going to allow you to speak. Aled, I will let you come back.
No, thank you, Chair. I've made my case, and I said at the beginning, you know, at the end of, by the 31st of March 2024, all schools other than secondary schools will still have a surplus budget. And I accept that there are concerns around the deficit budget in secondary schools, but we'll be working on that with the secondary schools during the next 12 months through the financial surgeries, etc., and hopefully we can reduce that impact. And I'm fairly confident that because of the more positive economic indicators for the upcoming 12 months, that we can reverse that by the following financial year.
Thank you, David.
That's all I've got to say. Thank you, Chair.
No, that's absolutely fine. Please don't think I'm being rude, because I think there's been some interesting debate and interesting information which is developed out of that. So please continue. I just didn't want it to become I want other people to contribute as well. Aled, please come back.
Just very quickly, the forecast for support from Welsh Government will fall dramatically within the next couple of years. And this year was an opportunity to start a more significant transformation of the schools within Powys. And I don't see any evidence of that transformation. We can go have a look at the capital budget afterwards, but I don't see any significant proposals to transform the schools within the start the process within the 12 months. The cabinet have been nothing but standing against transformation. The evidence to date suggests that. And there's a huge risk for our schools going forward. The budget, the reserves will have been eaten up completely, and there will be nothing in the cupboard for the start of the following financial year, and that is putting our schools at a huge risk. What is being done to mitigate that risk?
I think you make a relevant point, and I think we need to come back to that, but we need to give a bit of direction on the meeting. So let's park that up for the time being. We've moved into a new. I'm going to bring Councillor Pete in because he put his hand up in the middle of the debate that's just gone on, and then I'm going to bring Lucy. But yes, we need to finish with delegated, and then we move on to capital. But let's try and get a bit of direction in the meeting. Councillor Pete.
Certainly, I think I just want to respond to Alex's last part on transformation and then come on to the main point I was making. Wave 2 of the transformation process.
Councillor Pete, I'd rather come back to the transformation if we could, and then I'll allow you to make comment then, or we're not going to finish where we are, if that's okay.
Okay, in which case I'll make the main point. Councillor David introduced the local context, but I think it's worth looking at the Welsh context as well. I've looked this morning just to check the latest figures. In the rural authorities, Carmarthenshire are looking at £2.7 million to be found within their school's delegated budget. Ceredigion, 2.1 million. Flintshire are talking about a 1% cut, equating to £1 million. And Conwy, in their latest figures, are talking about a £3.36 million cut from their school delegated budget. And that is assuming they can actually deliver a balanced budget, because their MTFS is still stating that there is a risk that they may have to look at Section 114 protection, because they're not completely confident at this point that they will be able to deliver a balanced budget. So when we're talking about the position facing this authority, it's important to look at the Welsh context, because we are not alone in this. All of the authorities that I've found in a rural context, and I'm aware from conversations that urban ones are looking at this as well, are saying quite clearly that for the first time in many years, they are not able to protect the school's delegated budget. I just wanted to put that in context for people that might not be aware of that.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Lynette. Yeah.
Yeah. Just to reiterate really what Councillor Peters just said, you know, the context across Wales is that schools will be facing the significant pressures. They are unprecedented times, as Councillor David mentioned earlier, about the pressures, etc., on school budgets. What I can assure Scrutiny of is early doors. We met with head teachers and chairs of governors in September. So at the very start of the budget setting process, as we were going through it, we met with schools, we called meetings with the head teachers and with chairs of governors to talk about this and to make sure we were working together with and supporting schools through all of this. So just to assure Scrutiny that whilst we understand and we know it, you know, for some schools it's the pressures there, we know that we've identified it very early with schools, and we are working with each individual school, finance officers, school improvement advisors, meeting regularly with each school individually and governing bodies to look at how we can work through all of this together. So just to say, you know, the pressures are there. We know we are working with schools, and we've involved schools in all of this process from very early doors, so that we're all prepared together and working through all of this together with schools, and understanding that across Wales, this is unprecedented in terms of schools and the pressures they will be facing.
Okay, I'm going to go to Councillor Lucy Alley before yourself. Councillor David used it before, and Lynette used it. I'm a little bit. I don't like the use of unprecedented. There's been difficult times before, so I'm really not sure that it is unprecedented. It's difficult times. I'm not denying that, but I think the use of unprecedented is. I don't like that use, and I've made that comment before. So, Councillor Lucy.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on the reserves, because Councillor David said that all schools had reserves apart from the secondary schools, but I think we're talking about an average across schools in the primary sector, and in particular, and I would just like confirmation of whether that's the case, whether it is an average, because my understanding is that there's a wide range and that not all schools do have a reserve budget.
Any comments?
Yes, it's an average, Councillor Lucy. Yeah.
So there will be schools within that, and I accept that we're not talking about individuals here, but there will be schools that actually will be really struggling because they don't have a reserve to draw on. So I think we need to be aware of that fact. Thank you.
And the use of reserves, it can only happen once, can't it? That's the difficulty. Aled.
Mary had a hand up for a moment. Whether
Oh, sorry, apologies. I was just looking for some figures on
now.
reserves, and I found them. Delegated school budget reserves stand at 9 million, around 8 million related to primary schools, and 1 million for special schools. The figure for high schools is 19k. Is that right?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Mary, did you wish to come in? I missed your hand. Sorry.
It's fine. I was just going to pretty much confirm, as Lynette did, that yeah, it's an overall picture. So that there are the majority of primary schools are in a surplus position, but there are a handful that are in a deficit position. Just 2 at the start of the year, but you know, that's not to say, so not all individual schools would be, but that sector would be in a overall surplus position. That's what we're anticipating.
Councillor Allen.
Thank you. It would be good to see a range as well, but you know, from the best position to the worst position. But my frustration here is the Cabinet are happy enough to discuss other councils' budget, but we cannot discuss the finance paper in front of us, the paper that was sent out late Friday in unopenable form, and we've only seen it this morning. It is frankly not good enough, Chair. This sort of document is a basis on which a budget is built, and it's simply unacceptable that we are not allowed to discuss this fully in public and have a greater understanding of the challenges that face our schools over the next 2 years and beyond. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Allen, I received the document as you did. I understand it was in the service on Friday afternoon, and I asked a question this morning why it was confidential. So I do share your concerns on that one, but obviously my hands are tied to anything about it. Don't make any further comment. I don't know. I asked the question, is it a political decision? I'm told there's information in there which is confidential for various reasons, and I had to accept them reasons.
And it is really impacting on our scrutiny. The Cabinet really needs to pull its finger out. Thank you, Chair.
Any comment by Cabinet on that?
When I'm unmuted, it's not a political decision. It came through from officers that there was confidential information in it, and I can only apologise that you're in that position, but it's not one that came as a request from either Councillor David or myself. The document was supplied in good time with as much information in it as possible. I cannot explain why you were unable to see it. My suspicion would be that it was in a SharePoint form and some people had permission to see it because I could see it and others couldn't. It's as simple as that.
Would you agree that it would have been helpful that we could have used that information into today's debate?
There's no reason why we can't use it in confidential session. And I'm sure in the reports that come back that will recognise it. I just have to take officers' advice that there is confidential information in there that they are not prepared to share. And like yourself, leave it at that. It's what we've been told.
So the information wouldn't, because it was confidential, it wouldn't have gone to the school's budget forum either.
They didn't ask for it, but I don't think it was.
Okay, Jane.
Just to pick up on the confidentiality of the data in that report, governing bodies have until May to submit their budget plans for the following year, and it's only at that point that they're approved by governing bodies, and they do become public later after that. So I think on the basis of the information being useful in terms of the budget, absolutely both Cabinet and Scrutiny would want to have some view of what schools are projecting, and it is on that basis that we are providing that information. But as I said, it is not yet approved by governing bodies for those future years. Therefore, it should not be seen or viewed in a public domain, because it's indicative figures at this stage and not final figures. So I just wanted to reiterate why that report is being treated in confidence at this point in time.
Thank you, Jane. Councillor Allard.
But on the 30th, at the end, last day of April, and in a couple of months' time, there will be an indicative of what the balance will be at the end of that financial year, well before the setting of the school budgets. So the council will be using the indicative, they're not cast in stone, but they are forecasts of where the schools will be. And this is all this is, to be honest. And I just don't understand why it cannot be used or more freely made available. And all papers to Scrutiny should be published. Is it a week beforehand, not late on a Friday afternoon? Thank you.
Okay, we are discussing delegated budgets. Any further comment in relation to that? We've seemed to have moved on from our budget savings into delegated budget, which I'm happy to do so. Is there any further comment? I would just like to ask, it was something I picked up in the school budget forum the other day, and I'm going to read it from their notes, and it says, right, I found it. Table 5, my main budget report, that the proposed 5.5 rise for the school's delegated budget. It's the second lowest rise of all departments and well below the 8.2% increase across the council. Is that equitable? Is that putting too much pain onto the school service?
Shall I come in there, Chair? I'm just my,
Yeah,
I'm just my face.
No, I was just getting people to go to table 5. That's not a problem. I should have given a bit of prior notice.
Okay, I'm just conscious my face is flicking on my screen, so I'm hoping people can hear and see me. I think in terms of that, we have worked really closely to make sure that it isn't putting unnecessary budget on it. When we talked through it at the budget forum, it was a productive and successful meeting. We also looked at other elements that we know are putting pressures on schools as part of the review of the funding formula that went out to consultation. So I think it is acceptable and it is manageable. And like I said before, we've worked really closely with all our schools on this, and we're really clear where they are right now. We haven't got any pushing back saying it's just not doable. What we have got is them saying this is where we are, what other options have we got? So we're not at that point right now. And like I said, we've had really successful visits to schools requesting us to look in detail at potential savings, and again we have identified savings there to help in the current pressure. So I think it is not going to be putting unnecessary pressure on them. It's just a reaction to the situation we're in, to be honest, but also it gives that opportunity.
But is there equity that the money that you, Aled, you're coming in, I'm not going to develop the point.
It's just a simple question really. Do schools know what their budget will be for the next financial year? Because is it tomorrow the report going to cabinet about the slight change in the funding formula? Schools don't actually, and there's no guarantee that is, I think, is calling on £500,000. There's no guarantee that the last time I looked at the report, unless it's changed, you were still trying to identify funding to support that change. So at this point in time, the schools don't know their budget for next year.
Mari, would you like to come in there?
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, sorry.
All right.
So back in September, October time, we worked to give schools indicative figures at that point of where the inflation was going and what we thought at that point was potentially going to be available for schools in terms of their additional funding. So that's what we sent out to them, and that's what they submitted on the basis of that. Then is what they submitted in December. So and that's what those projections are based on. And what we've known since then will be either reducing the pressures or increasing the funding to it. So I think that they've got a pretty good idea of where they will be. It's not exact, and there will be changes to that, over the next sort of month or so. But they'll be getting their indicative. Well, they'll be getting their allocations for 23-24 in the first week of March, early March, and indicative funding then for the future years at that point as well. So that's the reason for the caution. Really, it is that bit of a. It's just the timing really at the moment that they'll have a firmer indication in about a month's time, really, maybe a little bit longer than that. It depends on budget discussions and timings around that. But they'll and that's when we'll have the finance surgeries with them then during March, and that's when we'll have an even clearer picture then really about where we're going with it, and where how they individually will be able to manage the pressures that are coming to them, and we will be dealing with those then on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you, Mary.
Timings is always difficult. It's always difficult, isn't it? Yeah. Back in September, they wouldn't have known what there was additional money coming from the UK government flowing through the Welsh government, or they wouldn't have known the draft 3.8 council tax rise, and they won't know their funding until the cabinet get their budget through full council. So and I accept this, the school service and the schools themselves do have to do a huge amount of work on this. So thank you, Mary, for and the rest of your team as well for the work you do on the school budgets. But you're always up against it time. So it's always difficult. Talk, Mary.
Thank you very much. Members, it's 11:35. Do you want a short break, or are you happy to continue?
Short break, please.
Okay, we'll have a short break. Hopefully we can tie things up very quickly when we return. It's 11:36. Should we say 11:45?
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Yeah. We'll save 11:45. Members and officers, just bearing in mind the recording will continue. So we'll come back at 11:45 if that's okay. Thank you very much.
Can everybody mute their microphones, please, and turn your cameras off?
Welcome back, everybody. We're in the Learning Skills Scrutiny Committee, and we're on item 4 on the agenda, the draft 2023-2024 budget. We've been discussing proposed savings and the delegated budget. Can we continue any discussions on the delegated budget, or is that concluded? Everybody content that we've given it adequate scrutiny and made some comments on it? Good. we've got a list of documents in front of us. I said that we would return to, I'm looking at my notes now, that we would return to Alan's comments on the development of the transformation of in the budget. Councillor Pete, you said that you'd wish to make some comment on that. So I'll bring you in and that will prompt the debate from here on in.
Thank you, Chair. My comment was really around Councillor Ali's comment that no progress had been made on transformation. I'd remind him that Wave 2 included the review of the Crickhowl catchment, which was completed with the report that came back to Cabinet and was rather overshadowed by the discussions around Llanbedr. So there actually has been some progress on transformation, and I'm expecting the information to come from officers in the next couple of weeks, which will result in the formal starting of engagement within the Llanfythin catchment area, which will be the focus of the major piece of transformation work over the next 6 to 8 months. So it was just putting the record straight with Alad's slightly unfortunate misunderstanding of the situation.
No, that's absolutely fine, Councillor Pete, and I'm allowing this discussion because I think it has an important relationship with the budget as we're moving forward. Aled, do you wish to come in further to develop this before I make some comments?
There's no misunderstanding on my part. Chair, it's very clear that the Cabinet delayed closures of some schools and pushed back the agenda of change and transformation in the catchment in the north. I think when I go back 2 or 3 years, the Crickhowl area, there was less pressure there for transformation. Officers produced documents showing that the case for change was smaller within the Crickhowl, except for obviously the 2 schools out, the 1 school that you were referring to. But that delay of closures probably cost the council about £500,000 in all. And when we get to the capital program, you can show us all where you are speeding up that transformation. Thank you.
Can I come back to that?
Before you come in, Pete, I'm going to add some comments so that you can answer that, because I'd share that concern really, and we're in a 10-year program, and I think the pace of the school transformation, the document reads, the corporate document, the cost of transformation over the lifetime of the school assets is cheaper than the status quo. I think it's very urgent that with the pace, in view of the documents we're reading today, the pace of school transformation, I think it is essential that we move this on as quick as we can, because the whole school service was behind us when it was initiated, and the whole process was to provide better education for our school, but indeed give equity, but also bring down our school's costs as well. So I think there is concern that the pace of transformation has been slowed down with, you're approaching it 12 months in. And I think there's a worry that school transformation isn't happening quick enough.
I can understand where those concerns would come from. I'd point out that the Llanfythin work is about to start. I would also point out Councillor Allen's comments around the costs of the delay on completing the implementation of closure at Dolly and Llanbedr, but would point out to him that both were under judicial review, and officers during the Purdah period had already taken the decision not to implement the closure on the 1st of August. So we were left in a position where we had to make a formal policy decision as to when those closures would be implemented, in light of the fact we didn't know when the judicial review processes would end. So we took the decision to take the educationally sound decision of ensuring pupils transferred at the end of a school year, and then took advantage of that time to complete a catchment review within the Crickhowl area, and to explore the one area where, when I was a scrutiny chair, I expressed concerns that an area in respect of Llanfihangel hadn't been fully explored. Both of those pieces of work have now been completed. The work on Llanfihangel actually explored some areas which will make transformation in other areas easier, because it has established precedents within the council area that will enable us to move forward with reference to precedent rather than having to set it. So that is where we are. There are a number of areas of work that have already been identified. Llanfihangel, as I say, is the next one that will move forward with the initial meetings similar to those used in Krakow taking place before Easter. I'm not sure exactly on the date yet. I have a meeting in a couple of weeks' time where we will be finalising that. The remainder of the programme has been outlined, and I'm working with officers at the moment within the financial and manpower constraints that we have available to us to see whether we need to prepare a republication of that process in order to move it forward further. But I'd also draw attention to the fact that transformation across the authority as a whole will be looked at much more extensively over the course of the next 6 to 8 months once this budget process has been completed, and schools transformation will be a significant part in that, as we look at not just the educational element of the schools estate, but whether there are other elements of service delivery that the schools estate can be used for, and that is a significant piece of work in and of itself. I don't know whether Emma, as Transformation Officer, you want to add anything to that, or whether Lynette, you want to as well.
Yeah, Councillor Peake, yeah, and Councillor Allard, we've strayed into previous ground, and we've heard them arguments so many times now. We're leaving behind the transformation that has taken place in the last 12 months, but we have a budget in front of us which is using up school reserves. And we believe that the transformation needs to pick up pace, because involved in that transformation is community and leisure centre facility projects, and we're unclear where we're going with this, and we need it to absolutely happen quicker, because we think this can add to the school budgets as moving forward. That is the point that is being made, and that is the corporate document that reads before us, and we're concerned at the pace which is happening. We were into the Llanfihangel catchment area at the end of the previous council. I was involved with that because I was part of it. Our councillor in a local ward is in that area, so I was involved in that. And now here we go, over 12 months on, and we're now moving into it again. So that's the concern. We're trying to get school budgets in a good place. There was desire within the school service to see schools transformation, and we believe the pace has slowed down. That's the point that's being made. Good. Right.
Yeah.
Anybody got anything further to be made on that? Georgie.
Oh, well, thank you, Chair. I mean, are you happy for me to just read through where we are with transformation and the project so that everybody can know where we are, or is that not needed?
I think the point's been made. We are here with the budget document today, and I think that's the importance today, but that's the worry. And my worry is we're using up school reserves. We've got nowhere else to go. We've got nowhere else to go. And the school transformation is seen as helping school budgets as we move on. So that's the point I'm making. Okay, members, we've got an agenda in front of us, and there's an awful lot of documents. So we've asked a lot of questions on the budget savings. Trying to get a bit of direction on us. Sarah's taken us through budget savings. We've asked questions on that. We've discussed the delegated budget. What else do members think that needs to be discussed today? Lucy. Lucy, your mic isn't up. Lucy, your mic still isn't up. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points I wanted to raise on the budget report for Cabinet. One was at 3.27. It mentions the fact that primary schools have performed well at inspection, which is great, really good news, and we're really pleased to hear that. But it doesn't mention the fact that some secondary schools haven't performed so well. And given the budget that we're looking at, and the secondary schools that haven't got their reserves, I think, you know, it's worthy of mention really, because it is important going forward. Cabinet need to be aware of that fact, and they perhaps won't be. And there's also mentioned about the financial toolkit for schools, which is what great. You know, it's a great tool, and I commend officers for coming up with that tool. But it doesn't provide the answers for all schools, and I think again it's important to be aware of that. So that was, I think that was the points that I wanted to make on that. I've made a note as well about the financial resource model, and that assumes a reducing pay award, and I thought that this might be a bit optimistic. Thank you, Chair.
Oh, thank you, Lucy. Sorry, Lynette, I've seen your hand up, but I think you're frozen, are you? No, she's with us. Go on, Lynette.
On mute though.
I can see she's trying.
Oh,
there we go.
Sorry. Yeah, just to come back on some of those points from Councillor Lucy, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah.
I think you make a very valid point, Councillor Lucy, about the secondary and the work that we've got to do in our secondary schools with our secondary school head teachers. You know, we've got very good working relationships with our secondary heads, and we all recognise together there's work to do there. I think the fact that you mentioned we do have a strong primary profile across Powys. We've got a number of inspections, and that's how we measure really how successful we are in as one measure. But we have, and it's a strong sector. As I say, in terms of secondary, that's why within the service area now we've extended the secondary school improvement team, and we do have now a large team, I have to say, and we are looking to see impact within that team and the work that they do with the schools and the leaders within our secondary school sector. But we still recognise there's work to do there in terms of standards, and work to do in terms of budgets as well. In terms of the toolkit, the point you make is very valid. It is a really useful tool, but for some schools, obviously, you know, some of their challenges need further input, etc., from officers as we go forward. So I think some of the points you made there, councillors, are really valid, and things that we are aware of as a service area. But thank you.
Thank you, Lynette. Georgie.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, I can see my head's going back and forth on my screen. So if I just change stop the video and come back again, see if that helps. I'd just like to really reiterate the secondary school improvement team. Obviously, with the demise of ERU and that secondary school improvement being provided through ERU, it was essential that we had that succession planning within Powys, and hence the appointment of the team. At the moment, for example, they've been in schools working alongside leaders, working really closely with them, looking at various elements of school improvement. So I'm really confident that the team we've got are there to help our teachers and our leaders, but also can work alongside them and really provide that bespoke support that individual secondary schools need. So I think I just want to give that assurance here to Scrutiny that we've considered where we were with secondary school improvement and appointed a team that can help us support, work alongside our schools to continue that improvement journey for them. In terms of the toolkit, thank you, Councillor Lucy. I must have had a bit of an epiphany because we were doing it before the current budget, so it was really helpful to have it on hand and share really quickly. I think in terms of the information that isn't there for schools, that's where we've been really proactive in supporting schools through their financial surgeries and looking at spend patterns school by school and being able to have those conversations with the heads and their chairs of governors. And again, they've been really positively received, and there's been other schools that we've gone in and looked at more intrinsically along their budget lines. So thank you very much for your comments on that one.
Thank you. Members, I'm going to give you a bit of direction now, and perhaps if we go to Appendix F and look at the pressures and see if they've been... Oh, Alid, you're looking at coming in.
Sorry, I wanted to go to Appendix A, but you go to Appendix F first.
Let's go to Appendix A. Let's go to Appendix A. What's your point?
It is just a capital program, but when you're talking about the school transformation, I was wondering if the portfolio holder could take us through the £33 million worth of capital program expenditure in this financial year. There's most of it is fairly self-explanatory. I was just wondering if have there been any changes from the previous year, and there's 6.1 million been spent on the school schemes, and I also wanted to pick up on the major school improvements. There's an ongoing line of £2.5 million there. Could the portfolio holder just talk through those few lines, please?
Happy to do that, Councillor Pete.
It's on page 178.
Which page are you looking at?
178.
178 of the pack, or one?
Today's pack, yeah.
I'd opened up Appendix A. Let me just come through
It's
it.
Appendix A of the capital programme.
Yeah, I'd opened up the Appendix A document rather than the pack. In general terms, there have been delays at a school, Callan of Irwin, in relation to the North Powys project, but the infrastructure and development work are ongoing on there. You will have had the information back in the last few days around a Schoolborough Huthgen getting approval, and that will now move to the next business stage. The development work at Brynllawarch and Ysgol Cadwyn is ongoing, and we're awaiting the responses on the Senny Bridge proposal from Welsh Government, which hasn't been received yet. So we're moving forward with those projects at this time. The main focus now will be looking at what comes out of the Llanfathin work for any additional capital works, and also anything that comes out of an initial review of what will be happening around the Gwynabyd catchment in respect of high schools. Both of those are pieces of work that are ongoing with officers at the moment. Does Emma want to add anything, or Lynette want to add anything?
It was a 6.1 million in, I know it's more difficult going forward years, but there's 6.1 million in this current year. What is that made up of? Is that mainly Callan and Derwen, or are there other elements as called Callan Cymru as well? I don't know where that features in this. It seems a little bit light and sketchy. And I also wanted to ask afterwards, where are the capital elements about greening Powys as well? When you talk about energy costs within schools, can you point us in the capital programme where I can see that? Because that's a major part of your agenda, is the greening of Powys.
As you'll know, Aled, all proposals that go to Welsh Government now have to deal with the question of net zero, and it's in meeting those ambitions and the additional revenues that will come from Welsh Government that element is being met primarily. As has been mentioned before, Nigel Bryn is working on external grants to bring into the system, which are not within the capital programme that you see here, in order to improve the greening agenda.
So there's nothing in the capital programme.
And the energy efficiency side of the work that you've heard in the budget cuts will add to the greening programme agenda. I think Emma wants to come in on some specifics.
Yeah, just to make clear, those don't feature in the existing capital programme as we see it now.
Not within the existing capital programme as it stands. Obviously, all of the proposals that are in with Welsh Government will have the net zero elements. And if you looked at the, if you've received the response from the Minister, it's a number of questions around the net zero that are going to need to be addressed at the next stage of the Ysgol Huthgen proposals.
Okay, no, it'd be great if Emma could break down the 6.1 and the 2.5. Thank you.
Oh, I'm actually going to come in, Chair, on the decarbonisation element or decarbonisation element to say that within the next year, that overall from an organisational perspective, not just in terms of anything new build schools, but over our assets, there will be work to take forward a costed decarbonisation plan. So that's work that needs to be undertaken. It's not commenced yet, Councillor Aled, and therefore not concluded within the papers that are before you today and the budget in this year. So that work needs to proceed and conclude. However, we are having discussions from a partnership perspective at the PSB around all things climate, decarbonisation and nature. And we're actually looking at whether we can do something as collective partners in this area, because we're all facing the same challenges. In respect of the capital programme itself as it stands, that's for the schemes that already exist within the programme and that were actually determined by the previous cabinet. So there hasn't really been any change there other than the recent commitment around Bro Hyddgen and the revised scheme there. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Lynette.
Sorry, just quick question to Emma, sorry, Chair. Thanks for that, Emma. So nothing's been added, particularly in the capital programme. And the costed decarbonisation plan, when is that going to be published? Because I got the impression that it was a bit of an emergency.
Yeah, I'm not sure of the timescale. Work has started. There is already an existing climate board, so work has commenced in that area. I know they've had to realign benchmarking the calculations around net zero. So there is work and activity already underway, but I don't know the exact date, I'm sorry, on the costed decarbonisation plan. It is something on a national level that all authorities need to do. So I think that's something we have to take away and firm up once we're clear about that. Unfortunately, Nigel's not with us today, our Director for Economy and Environment. He may have a better idea of timescale, so apologies, Councillor Aled, I don't know the answer.
Thanks.
Okay, just before you come in there, Lynette, I'm a little bit confused with this because the existing capital programme costs are not included in the fundings. It's a 10-year strategy. You previously, in the detail previously in previous years, have projected what those costs would be. There's nothing in this document except for a notional amount of 10 million in 27-28. So I'm unclear moving forward what the cost of the transformation is going to be, because those figures aren't included. And I had a brief look back. There's always been a figure in the document to say what the capital programme is going to cost over the years, and there is nothing there except that notional figure in 27-28.
I'm not sure if Jane wants to come in there, Chair. The 10 million there it is in respect of the emerging work. We know we've got some priority work that we need to do, for instance, in the Callum Cymru area. So we're waiting. Feasibility is now concluded. We're doing some work on the papers in that area, and then we'll be able to bring proposals forward in what Councillor Peters referred to as wave 2. We've also continued the conversations with Welsh Government in terms of their funding envelope and what's available to us there. We're focused on the programmes here and now. There's a considerable amount of work underway with the live project, so we don't have the capacity to scope out the full extent. But what we do have separately, and I think you're already aware of, Chair, but I appreciate it's not reflected within the papers today, are the lifetime costs, and as you touched on earlier, the savings of transformation versus supporting the status quo. But Jane might want to come in terms of the longer term strategy.
Thanks, Emma. I think you've stolen Lynette's thunder there. So Lynette's
sorry, Lynette.
Jane, do you want to make comment?
Yeah, I will briefly, Chair. Yeah, Emma's correct in terms of that £10 million that's identified in 27-28. That is to continue the school's transformation work after the current Band A and Band Bs are finished. It is an indicative figure. We don't have the detail of what allocations we will get from Welsh Government, or indeed which projects would be covered by that. But it's important to get some indicative figures into the strategy so that we can start to plan for that and look to see how they can be financed in the future. So that's why it's a very broad 10 million at this stage, but it will be finalised as we get nearer that time. So just to give you a bit of an update on that.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. But as I said, we previously projected costs, the total costs of our programme. I'm a little bit worried now. Is there the desire to do future capital projects which would have been identified in the programme previously? So I'm a bit concerned that there isn't an estimated projected cost there. But point made. Okay, Aled, were you coming back on that?
Yeah, Jane knows my favourite is to have a 10-year forward work programme, but that's some distant memory now. There's other questions on the sports and leisures. There's only less than £1 million being spent. There was 2.2 this time. There's less than £1 million. How much impact on the schools will that be there? And still haven't had the answer to the 2.5 million on the major improvements either. Thank you.
What was the question on the 2.5, Aled, on the major?
Yeah, what is the breakdown? What schemes? Because in some of the earlier papers somewhere, it looked as though more responsibility for maintenance was going to fall on the schools. I was trying to find reference to that now. Can't actually find it.
Sarah's looking to come in. I'll just add to that. I think I've got the information. It's 2.5 million each year until 27, 28.
Yeah, and this year it was 5.3.
Yeah, and the worry from my point of view from that is I think there's the backlog maintenance plan is over 80 million. So I'm a bit concerned, is that 2.5 is that going to be satisfactory to meet those needs? So Jane, you're coming in, and I think Sarah's waiting in the wings as well.
Yeah, in terms of the major improvements, that is an allocation, an annual allocation, and the actual projects identified come through on an annual basis. So that's based on prioritising work across the school estate as needed. So those are just allocations at the moment, and the further detail will be coming later.
Okay, thank you, Jane. Just before we go to Sarah, but that is a very important pressure. And this budget may not meet that pressure by breakdowns, etc. So Sarah, I'll bring you in there then.
Yeah, my point was around the current in-year budget, in that it does include the community focused schools capital grant as well. So that's why it will look higher as well than the 2.5 that's for every year subsequent to this one.
Okay. Happy with that, Aled?
And the leisure.
Okay, yeah.
Is there an impact on schools at all?
There's lots of hands up. Somebody just chip in.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of curriculum delivery, we're working, I'm just going to repeat really what I said earlier, in that, we are working really closely with the head of service in leisure. Georgie is meeting regularly to ensure that, in terms of the impact on schools, that we will be, ensuring broad and balanced curriculum delivery. We'll be ensuring that. It may look different, as I said earlier, may be different, but we certainly be ensuring that provision is there for those pupils that need the curriculum delivery. So there will be no change to the curriculum delivery, only that there may be a change to how it's offered, but certainly we won't be we'll be ensuring that the pupils get what's intended, particularly in light of the new curriculum and what's needed there.
Thank you, Lynette. Members, questions? Okay, one of the other things, one of the pressures which we're going to suffer ongoing is dwindling school populations. Student numbers are going to fall over the next 5 years. Do you think our budget is capable of absorbing this pressure? It's not identified in one of the pressures, and it worries me a little bit. Go on, Lynette.
Yeah, you know, when we see a decrease in pupil numbers, it obviously has an impact on the budget. And this is part of the work we need to do with schools now and are doing, where they are forecasting. Of course, secondary schools can forecast it a little bit easier than primary many times because they know what's coming up and where they, you know, what numbers are. It's about making those changes in a timely manner. So we know that during the pandemic, schools received extra money for accelerated learning, etc. So they could increase staff levels. You know, we need to work with schools now where we are seeing numbers decrease, in that we look at there's two aspects really. It's about making sure we've got the right curriculum offer across the piece, you know, a broad offer for those learners, be it secondary or primary, you know, when numbers are decreasing, you know, and making those changes in a timely manner so that schools are ready for that. We're very good at when it's increasing, but it's making sure we make those timely decisions with schools when there's a decrease in numbers too. So working alongside, and obviously, as I say, secondary schools will have more awareness of what the numbers are looking at, the projected numbers for the next few years, but we need to work with schools to make those decisions because it does impact on school funding.
Do you think it should be identified as a pressure in the document? I can't find it there. No.
Okay. Yeah, I mean,
no. Jane's shaking her head. I'd be interested in Jane's comment there.
I think just when pupil numbers fall, we get less money from Welsh Government through the settlement, but there's also less money allocated to schools. So you see the schools delegated budget funding reduce accordingly, and that's why it's not shown as a pressure, because that money would go down and we would have to make the changes necessarily then at a school level to accommodate that. Okay.
Yeah, I'll give that some thought. Understand the reasoning there. Councillor Gareth before Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Chair. Just an observation and a plea really to the portfolio holder. And Lynette just mentioned about more awareness in the secondary schools and all through schools. I assume she'd mean as well of numbers coming through. But following on from the last scrutiny, I would make a plea that they move with haste with the reviews of the catchment areas, in particular where I'm talking about in Corinian in relation to Castle and David Llwyd. So that would help our school a great deal to know these numbers moving forward. So just a comment, deal.
Thank you, guys. Councillor Danny.
Thank you, Chair. May I ask, do we know why pupil numbers are falling, or have we already covered this? I may have missed something.
I could probably answer that, but I'll leave it to one of our Lynette.
Yeah, I mean, the obvious answer is that we got less young people in Powys as we move forward. So I know Emma's team have been doing the sort of surveys. We're looking at projected numbers going forward, and actually less children in the county. So that, but we also do have at secondary, we do have some going to other local authorities as well. So some, particularly the area I know you're from. The Churchstick area there, Councillor Bebb, and there are a number of children there in secondary who go to Bishop's Castle, for example. So there are a variety of reasons, but we have got less young people in the county going forward projected.
So that's the main reason is not enough young people. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks for that. Cheers.
Yeah, I think somewhere I read, is it 9% in primary and 3% in higher education, in secondary education over the 5 years or something. So yeah. Okay. Yeah, Jane, I've thought about what you said and you're probably right. So good. That could also result in less teachers as well, isn't it? So yeah, I guess it's cost neutral, isn't it? Good. Members, where do you want to go from here? I'm looking through the documents. I must admit, I've really struggled with today's meeting a little bit, but maybe a little bit more work on my behalf, and perhaps giving a little bit more direction to the documents and whatever, and we should have pulled some more documents out which are more relevant to education. But I'm still learning. Members, where do you want to go from here?
Chair, would it be helpful for members to actually just come up with some thoughts now about overall recommendations they want to make or outcomes if they haven't got any further questions?
Yeah. I think we've dealt with 4.2 on our agenda, the impact assessment. So are you happy that we've been through all the documents and considered everything before we make some recommendations? Lucy?
Yeah, I mean, there was one point that I raised earlier that I don't think I had a response to, which was as part of the finance resources model. It mentions a reducing pay award, but I wonder whether that's really realistic. And then there was another point I wanted to pick up, which was on the charges schedule, which talks about homeschool transport and the vacant seat scheme charges. I thought we weren't, that was no longer happening, that we didn't have a vacant seats scheme.
Okay, we got both them points. Everybody's thinking, Lucy, which is good.
I guess that there is a bigger thing as well about the large amount of money that is coming out of the school's budget and how the impact assessments address the sort of the individual items that are listed, but it doesn't talk about the bigger effect on schools where, you know, they might be having to look at reducing staff numbers and that sort of thing. And obviously that's, you know, a really important element of education going forward. So that's the third point. Then I'll shut up.
No, it's fine. It's a very relevant questions, Lucy. Lost my screen at the moment. Anybody? I've got a great desire to answer any of Lucy's 3 points.
Chair, I just wanted, can I come in, please?
Councillor Liz.
Thank you. You know, I just wanted to say that, you know, having listened to all the discussion, particularly that between Councillor David and Councillor Allard, there's obviously no easy way to make this work in terms of the budget deficits and the you know, the reduction in reserves. And one of the things I did wonder in relation to the risks in that, clearly there's a risk in relation, a bigger risk in relation potentially to secondary schools. And I wonder whether we should be in a future scrutiny meeting looking at how the secondary school, I'm trying to think of the name of it. What's the name of it, Lynette? The secondary school thing that you're implementing, the new, you know, bringing it in-house, in fact.
So the secondary school improvement team.
That's it, the
Yeah.
secondary, yeah. I wonder whether we should be looking at how that's working and whether there is any impact, you know, on the quality and the standards, you know, given where we are. So that's my suggestion in terms of trying to move things forward a bit. And, you know, I guess that, you know, this has been, we've had quite a lot of information from the service heads. But, you know, whichever way you look at it, it's not a happy picture, but I think that we have to, as we would, wherever these cuts are made, we have to kind of monitor and make sure that the impact and the outcomes, you know, are not overly detrimental.
Okay. Any comments on Lynette? Nancy, go on, Lynette. First,
Happy
please.
to take to make the starter on all of those points. So hopefully, and then officers can come in, and if that's okay with you, Chair, and back me up. In terms of the pay, it's really important in the papers to note that in terms of, as Councillor David said earlier, all of the money that's been come to the council for schools to meet the pressures is being passported to school budgets. So just to make that point, in terms of pay as well, just to note that you know, the funding formula pays at the ISR rate for that school. So that's the range for the size of school. And if schools have decided to go above that range, that is a school-based decision, and they would have to find the funding and the pay rise, etc., to go with that. Also, that the funding formula is actually schools get paid the pay rise, etc., for the posts that are funded within the formula. So if schools have got extra staff on, they'll have to meet those costs as well. So that's just an important factor there around pay, etc., that, you know, it is within the formula that it is the funded posts for the size of the school and the allocation to the school, and also that affects the ISR, not just for the head teacher, but for other senior leaders within the school. And so if schools have gone above that, then it obviously causes sometimes some concerns. In terms of the vacancies, I think Sarah will come in a moment. I think Nancy will pick up as well on the pay a little bit more than for me. But I was just, the third point Councillor Lucy made around staffing, really. And obviously, you know, ultimately, we know that, you know, when we're looking at schools and the school budgets, yes, particularly as we've talked about earlier, with reducing numbers of pupils perhaps and additional pressures, then, you know, staffing can be affected, but we work through that with our schools. And just to give Scrutiny the assurance today that that's very much part of how we work with our schools in the financial surgeries, of which HR officers attend as well. So that's a key area that we look at when we're looking at all of these budget issues in schools. In terms of the secondary school improvement team, I quite agree with you, Councillor Liz, that as a Scrutiny and as Cabinet too, you know, you've got a right to know the impact of the work of this team. It is, we have invested in this. So in terms of our secondary school, from a service perspective, we've invested a lot of money and a lot of capacity in this team. And so we will obviously need to demonstrate impact to yourselves, and also to Eston. And so, you know, we would welcome, and I think it is on the agenda for Scrutiny at some point, but we do need to bring reports to you about the impact and effectiveness of that team going forward. So I take that on board, and I quite agree with you. So those are just some of the aspects, Chair, that I just tapped on, but other officers can come in and give a little bit more detail around some of that, if that's okay, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, Nancy and Sarah are waiting, and also Mary. Nancy?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to come in to say that with regards to the Councillor Lucy's question around the pay award, it's been included at 3.5% as set by Welsh Government.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Sarah?
Yeah, it was just about the vacant seat scheme. I believe it may be in relation to agreements that were in place when the scheme ended, but it's certainly something I can double check with Transport and confirm if that would be helpful.
Thank you for that, Sarah. Aled?
Just a quick one. And under the BPP impact assessment on, what's it titled? Reduced maintenance budgets, offices and depots. It does say schools will be impacted, and that's on page, education can be impacted on page 329, and the outcome is bad. So what is that impact? It doesn't mention education in the stuff below, but corporate landlord function, I'm not sure how much that does impact on the school estate. But that headline there to say that the maintenance levels is going to be reduced, and I was just wondering what impact that is going to have on schools.
Lynette?
Yeah, we've been working really closely with our property colleagues, etc., around school compliance and building works, etc. We meet weekly around all of this. Sarah attends the meeting, and so you know, we're aware of issues that we need to address. You know, the fire checks, etc., like that. So it's around all of that, Councillor Adam. We are working with our property colleagues to address some of these issues. I don't know, Sarah, if you've got any more detail behind that about the work you've been doing. Is that okay, Chair?
So there's a question of whether fire doors will be maintained properly, because I know there's a big piece of work to get them up to spec, and I don't know if it's been completed yet, but there are quite a few issues around various schools about fire doors and things. It just concerns me that basic health and safety sort of stuff is maybe being pushed back rather than being dealt with. Thank you.
Okay, Sarah.
Yeah, there's been a really robust programme of fire risk assessments with schools throughout the academic year, which will be coming, I think, will be fully completed in the summer term. And working with colleagues in property, we've been able to liaise with schools really effectively to make sure that they're aware of any changes that may need to be made, and that work can be done in a timely manner. There is budget that needs to be looked at in respect of that, but we're trying to be agile with the funding pots that are available to us, and where absolutely possible, identify those that may come from capital grants and existing revenue streams.
Okay, so you don't see any impact of reducing the maintenance budget going forward?
Yeah. Obviously, it's hard to kind of predict what's going to come up in terms of the maintenance that is required, and year on year there is, you know, we have a large schools estate and we have an older schools estate in many of our schools, and so obviously there is a large amount of maintenance that's required. But what we're trying to do is make sure that we can work together effectively, collaboratively, to try and identify what that is, to get it moved forward at pace, and also support schools with identifying appropriate contractors, rather than making sure that they may be having to undertake that work by themselves.
Thank you. There was a significant contingency fund which was potentially going to be used because of the delay in the closing of a Dollar School. Has that contingency fund been used? Although that was distributed at the end of the year financially, I wasn't coming to think about it. But are you putting in place another contingency fund going forward?
Is that particularly? Oh, Lynette's got her hand up. I'm Mary.
Maria and Lynette have got their hands up. Go on, and whoever wishes to go first. It's going to be you, Lynette, because Mary's
right. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we have got a contingency fund. We do put that in place every year. And just to say that also what we do get for schools is we do have grants, major improvements that come in. We don't know what that will look like this year yet, but we do have the grant coming in as well to address this too. Thank you.
Well, can I ask you if it was overspent this year or not?
Good question. I'll perhaps other officers will know the answer to that. Mary might.
No, the contingency fund isn't overspent in this year, not at this point anyway, and we're not anticipating that it will be.
I am. Good news. Thank you.
Good. Just a few more questions, if you wish, before we make some recommendations. One thing we haven't discussed today is the budget survey. I'm interested to know, there is some comment from in relation to schools in the budget survey. I'm just curious, does that go directly to schools, or is it just goes through the corporate service where it's just picked up online or whatever, or do we contact schools in relation to that? Because I was surprised there wasn't more comment in it from schools, really. It goes to schools then, yeah. Good, that's good to hear. It's up to them whether they want to respond or not, isn't it? Good. Should we have a go at doing some recommendations then? We've been through an awful lot today. I've made a few notes. I'm happy to take recommendations. We spoke today before while I joined the meeting about the savings proposed. can those savings be delivered? I'm going to prompt the conversation today for members. Do you think those savings are secure? Do you think there's consequences of implementing them? Let's have some recommendations, please. Okay, I would suggest I'm a little bit concerned with the savings. I'm not sure they can be met, to be fair, especially in relation to photocopy and energy, etc. If those savings aren't met, I really do worry, and then that's an extra pressure on the school reserves. So would that be an adequate recommendation? I'm not going to make all the recommendations, members. What do you think, Lucy?
Yeah, I'd agree, Grimver, and my concern would be with some individual schools. Some schools will probably manage all right, but others will really struggle in terms of the delegated budget.
Yeah, members, please make comment freely. We'll pull them all together and share them with you at some point, and before we make the recommendations. Good.
Yeah, huge concerns around the school estate that impacts on that, the achievability of that as well. Because I'm pretty certain some corners of some schools have never got up to 18, I think, is it? But because some schools do leak like SIVs, really. But so, but overall around the service element, I'm content that the officers will be able to deliver those. Yet to see the whole impact on that, but the delegated element of those savings, real concerns about that, and we might get onto the use of reserves to balance to meet those pressures is a big issue as well.
Thank you, Councillor David.
Yeah, Chair, I'm just concerned that there are certain primary schools that will not be able to reach a balanced budget with the current climate. So I think that is a concern that we'll have to look out for in the future and find out which schools have not been able to do it. There could be a lot actually approving a deficit budget for the next financial year. And that is what concerns me, really. We need to keep a check on those.
Yeah, no, it's a very relevant point. You've expressed it before, Councillor David, and I'd add to that the use of reserves can only be done once, and I worry about that. I'm not sure who's next. But
sorry, just to follow up on David's point, really good point. Will the Cabinet be changing the rules around setting balanced budgets? Will they be making it over a longer term, or will they be staying within the existing financing school scheme policy that already exists, or will they be tweaking that to get themselves out of a difficulty? Thank you.
Councillor Pete?
We've no plans to change things at the moment, but we're waiting on officers to come back to us once the budget surgeries have been completed, so we have a full picture. The thing we point out is, and it's something that was mentioned very early on by members of the committee, the expectation is that these gas prices and others will be falling significantly, and there were questions raised around whether these high figures are actually the future. So it's something that we'll be monitoring very closely throughout the period, because as has been mentioned, there are other pieces of work that are ongoing to mitigate these measures that we're waiting on other officers to come forward with.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pete. I'm going to go along the list now. Councillor Lucy?
Yeah, it was just to bring up again the impact assessments. I think if we had more information in the impact assessments, it might give us greater assurance that the changes are more achievable.
Agreed. Councillor Liz?
Yeah, I agree actually on the impact assessments. I think more information would be helpful, but I think we have had some of that from the officers, and I think this is the best that we can get with this situation. I won't say it's unprecedented because I know you don't like that term, Chair, but we are in an unparalleled situation, I think, and we can only go with this and monitor things very, very closely and try and mitigate where we can. If we do find that, for example, some primary schools are, are being hit more than others. I'm not quite sure how that can be done, but where there's a will, there's a way, I think.
Good. Councillor Dunny?
I'd just like to bring up that we spent a lot of time discussing whether the document should be confidential or not. Admittedly, with Aled, it didn't give us much to work with. Certain times we have to accept that they are. Maybe some clarity on why it was confidential perhaps might help us understand. Not this time, but in future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Dunny. Councillor Gareth?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just think we've got some fantastic officers in the education department. I know from my work with Brooke Wright, and we're very grateful to their hard work. Deep down, I think they suspect that we're going to have a job meeting the delegated budget savings, as we all do here. One plea to you, Chair, and to the officers, it'd be a lot easier to run this scrutiny today if we'd had the papers pulled out a little bit more for education. There's so many papers to navigate around today that I'm not ashamed to say I really struggle jumping around from page to page, and perhaps that could be made easier for us in future meetings. Thank you.
I tend to agree, Gareth, and I think that's apology for myself. Really, it's something which I should have picked up on, really, and maybe that was a job description for me, that I could have done that and identified them previous to the meeting. So yeah, I think it's a point well made. Councillor Liz.
That's an old hand. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I think there's a comment to be made in there in relation to transformation. I also don't think it's an exciting budget. I think I would love to have seen something in there in relation to education, which would have been different. I think I'm choosing my words correctly here. I found it quite boring. We need to see something different. We need to see it moving forward, and that's not a criticism of officers. It's a criticism of the political side of it. We need to see some transformation. We need to see something exciting. We do have a new digital world. I don't know if we've got enough budget in there to develop that. So I was looking for something. There's no better word, transformation. So that's what we need. We've got to develop our education. Not that we're not achieving in education. I'm trying to word it properly. We are achieving, but yes, our new cabinet said that they wanted to do things differently. I'm not seeing that. Councillor David.
Yeah, Chair, I just wonder whether or not it'd be worth officers meeting with local authority reps online to indicate the importance of trying to set a balanced budget. I think we need to make those representatives aware of what the situation is.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's a point that can be considered. Thank you, David. Councillor Aled.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wanted issue around the maintenance, health and safety. I wasn't completely satisfied by the answer. Felt as though it was a bit of a make do and mend. We'll get through it somehow, but it's an extremely important area. I know there were significant investments in the past. We haven't really touched on preschool meal, cost of meals going up. For those families that don't qualify for free school meals, that's always a difficult issue for families. But it's difficult to see how it cannot be increased, because I remember huge resistance in the past over free cost of school meals. I accept there's a rollout for the very youngest couple of years within schools, but it's an area of concern as well. Thank you.
You, Aled. Any other recommendations? Members, I will give it some thought, and I'll have a discussion with my vice chair as well. Obviously, we covered a lot of things today, so please, if you've spent some further time on these documents and you feel that there's some further comment, please share that with us, and we'll add if we think it's suitable to the recommendations before we share them with you. Obviously, it's very, very complex, and there will be few occasions up to the budget setting rounds for us to make further comment, but are you content where we are now?
We should mention leisure as well, I think,
Yes.
because the 1.1 million pounds for future years, I can't remember the wording, but it's still to be confirmed, that element that to cover additional energy prices, because if there'll be a significant round trip and additional costs for pupils to travel from significant distances to probably for their swimming lessons and things. So just need to touch on that as well.
Thanks, Aled. Emma.
Chair, I was just wondering whether there were any recommendations from Scrutiny in respective areas that Scrutiny feel that we could focus on to help with the budget that we may not have explored.
It's a relevant comment, members. I open that up to you. Gareth.
I think we've discussed it a little bit earlier, and I have emailed Emma a couple of times about possibility of solar panels, energy efficiencies. There's no end that we could go to do to save the school money in light of the ever increasing energy costs, be it oil, electric, gas, everything. And again, efficiencies with insulation this time of year. It's crazy that we're in such a modern country and we're asking our staff to turn down the heating, and I know our head teacher has told all teachers not to take in blow heaters or personal electric fires. So yeah, possibly going down those roads. Thank you.
Yeah, Aled.
And that's not reflected in the capital programme, is it? The ambition to make our schools more efficient. It's almost hope there's something coming down the track from Welsh governments, rather than a bit of more certainty around that.
And I did mention that Nigel Brennan was doing some work in relation to that, so it would be interesting to see the outcome of what Nigel come up with there. But my only concern was that, and I didn't mention it at the time, I don't believe that will be 100% grant funding, and that's the worry in relation to that. Lucy.
Yeah, no, I'd like to see a bit more in there about the school maintenance and how that's going to be achieved to ensure that the buildings don't deteriorate further.
Agreed.
Yeah, and that's tied in with the school transformation programme, really spending money on buildings which may not be with us in days gone by. Lynette.
Just to come in, Chair, if I may, on the comment about maintenance there, as is mentioned earlier by Councillor Aled as well, in terms of health and safety, we do ensure our schools are safe and places for our children to be, but it is an increasing challenge to maintain the building stock that we've got. And as you've mentioned, transformation is key here going forward, but all schools are safe for our children, and particularly, we know that we did a lot of work over COVID ensuring they were safe places for our children to attend. So, health and safety of our children is paramount, and staff as well, and schools' responsibility to make sure that all the health and safety measures are in place, are there. And where schools have more difficulty, the risk assessments are there and the mitigations to ensure that our schools are safe places for our children to learn. But as you've already identified, we have got an aging building stock, and so that work is crucial going forward. But just to assure you today that those schools are safe for our health and safety for our learners, and that's part of the governing body's responsibility as well.
Lynette, you're absolutely right, and I'm not here to pick holes in it, and I certainly do. But we as councillors will all know individual schools which will have problems. I have a school in my ward, and we don't want to go that needs safeguarding fencing. In my opinion, that's a health and safety issue, but I think the governing body have been very reasonable and understand budgets. But when there's an 82 million backlog and there's 2.5 million committed in the budget, it's difficult to see how some of these projects are going to be completed. But the point's been made previously. But Lynette, when we're critical of these things, we understand the situation. Emma challenged us there with us to come up with ideas, and I think she rightly did so. So very often we're so very critical, but yeah, we should be forward thinking, and maybe Scrutiny should be thinking out of the box and certainly helping with that. But obviously, not much forthcoming for you today, but yeah, we'll bear that in mind in future. Yeah, that's very nice, whoever that is.
Somebody's musical.
Was that what trying to get us to go and just do a bit of cut some shapes? I don't think you're looking at the best person with me to do that. Members, any more recommendations?
I think the huge risk around future budgets, when all the reserves have gone, that has to be front and center of our recommendations, really. There's a huge risk around that. I haven't heard of any mitigation going forward. I don't see the school transformation being able to take up that slack, or not that slack, that pressure within the next couple of years. You know, it's always a slow process, frustratingly slow. And so there's a huge risk around that going forward. And the sooner we get more firmer figures would be good to see. And even if it's in a private session of Scrutiny where we can have a look at the list of schools so we can understand the range of challenges. Because you know, even in this confidential paper, we're just seeing the global figure rather than the range of challenge to various schools. So I think that has to be front and center of our recommendation.
Aled, I'm happy, as we're nearing the end of our meeting, if you want to go into confidential session to discuss this paper, I'm happy to take it to confidential session if you want to make some quick comments on it, but entirely in the hands of the committee.
Well, it's a bit more explanation, because I've only been looking at it now and again while it only came through an hour before meeting, so I'm happy to go to confidential if you wish. But I just wanted to mention also sports development officer. There's a disabled sports. I'm not sure what's happening there. I'm sure that probably have an impact on schools, but it doesn't appear in the you know, the impact assessment relating to schools. It's distinct by itself. I'm not sure, you know, there's a lot of crossover between various areas. Thank you, Chair.
I'm going to bring Jane in first.
It depends whether you're going into confidential session. Otherwise, I can just give a little bit of an overview in response to something that Councillor Aled has just said.
Members, I'm in your hands. Which do you wish to do?
Quick confidential session.
Okay, we'll do that. Can we just complete, Jane, if you're happy to do that, stay with us for good. Members, any more recommendations that you'd like to try from today's meetings? No? Okay, then I would like a proposal that we go into confidential session, please.
How's that?
Lucy, seconded by?
Happy to, second.
Thank you very much. When can you take us through what we need?